Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel. I'm Caleb, I use he, they pronouns, and this week I'm posting a new mental health video every day of this week, and it's going to be a video that talks about some topic that aligns with my identity or some topic that I find important. And today's topic is about the first time that I got caught self-harming. And trigger warning, of course, I'm going to be talking about self-harm. I'm going to be talking about the way I did it, what I did, what I used to do it, and yeah. So if that's triggering to you, go ahead and click off the video now. I also have other videos that I've talked about this week that you could check out that are less triggering. Anyways, I say the first time that I got caught because I was cutting myself before and after this incident, but this was such a distinct memory for me that I wanted to share. So I typically would cut myself on my inner thighs. I don't really know, I can't give you some elaborate reason why I cut myself. If I could go back and tell myself what was wrong, I would definitely tell that kid that hey, what you're going through is panic attacks. And at the end or towards the end of the panic attack, I would cut my inner thighs because that would relieve me. I think more so looking back, it became a habit, and I would think that oh, the only way to stop this panic attack is to cut myself. But yeah, that's not really a part of the story. That was just a little background on what sort of cutting I did. But whenever I got caught, I was actually cutting my arms. I don't know why I was cutting my arms. And I do remember my volleyball coach, so I play volleyball, by the way, and I remember always trying to be really careful about cutting my arms because I knew that it would hurt whenever I would go to practice. So again, I don't know why I cut my arms that day, but I did. I think I thought we didn't have practice or something. Anyways, I cut my arms, and my volleyball coach noticed, and I remember feeling scared that she was gonna tell, but she never told me that she was gonna tell. But I ended up having to go to the guy, the guidance counselor requested to see me, and I don't remember who the guidance counselor was or what that conversation even looked like. I was probably scared out of my mind because I knew going to the guidance counselor meant that they were gonna call my parents. But I remember they gave me the option to choose which parent they would call. So I chose my dad because I was he won't care that much, so I should call him. But then of course he's gonna tell my mother. So yeah, and I don't remember the opening conversation, but there were distinct phrases or things that my parents said that I still hold on to this day. Maybe not hold on to, but that I still remember to this day. Which was, so we were at the dinner table, eating dinner together. I have siblings, so my siblings were there as well. And my dad thought it was funny to make a joke about it. So we had a fork and knife or whatever, and he was oh, make sure Dead Name doesn't take the butter knife or else she'll cut herself. And I don't know, looking back, I'm this is your response as a parent? Out of all the things you could say, you decide to say this. What? So that was one of the first things I remember him saying. And then two, he said, next time you should just cut up the river, not across. And I'm and that's the thing that hurts the most because that made me feel ashamed and guilty and embarrassed and all those things. And I guess shame and embarrassment does stop behavior, but it's not the most effective way to stop behaviors because then I just feel as though I'm the thing that's wrong, you know? And then the third thing he said, which is after dinner, I'm pretty sure, he was because also I should include, usually when I cut my thighs, I would use my razor, but the time that I cut my arm, I had used his I don't even know what it was. It was like a box cutter thing that belonged to him. So I think like my mother thought it was like his fault because he gave me access to that. When like really like instead of figuring out whose fault it was, it should have been focused more so on like why is our kid doing this? Like what help does our kid need? Things like that. That was not a part of the conversation. Or if it was, it wasn't like an overwhelmingly like dominant message of, hey, we want to help you, hey, we want to like show you that there are better ways, there are better things that you could be doing with your life. That was not the message I got. The message I got was like, why do you want attention? Like, why are you like making us look bad as parents? Or like why are you doing this? It wasn't like, hey, we don't really understand why you're doing this and we have never done this, but we do love and care for you, which is like the message I should have received, but you know. Anyways, the third thing that he said to me was like, next time, like, don't use any of my stuff to do it, which is like, cool. Like, I'm glad your main concern in this situation is like you being to blame. Like, and I get it. Like, I guess that came out of like fear because like that day it was like self-harming. Like, who knows when or how like I would have maybe done a lot worse to myself. So yeah, those three things that he said to me like have stuck with me for a while, because I'm just like, out of all the things that you could say to your kid, like why would that be one? Like why would any of those individual things be one? Like I guess they just didn't find it serious enough, or I guess this was like a coping or like a defense mechanism for them to just sort of like dismiss the issue as an issue, because like if you don't categorize it as an issue, then it's apparently not an issue. And I think after that, they thought that I was like fine and like no longer cutting myself, but like I still just continued to cut my inner thighs, and I was like, I'm never cutting my arm again. This only confirms that like people who cut their arms like get in trouble. Because like in my mind, like if you cut anything that was like visible, then you would just get in trouble. And I guess there wasn't much thought processing beyond that. Okay, at this point I'm rambling and I'm not sure how to end the video. This only confirms to me that like parents are not perfect people, and that those who I like looked up to and thought of as like leaders and like positive people in my life weren't necessarily that, or like they were positive in some ways and not positive in other ways. And yeah, that was my like first time I got caught self-harm story. My parents did not take it seriously and decided to make jokes about it, and those jokes hurt and made me feel just like shame and embarrassment instead of making me feel like loved and cared for, which is like what you would hope your child would feel, right? In the comments below, let's talk about healthy ways of coping. So comment below like healthy ways that you cope with depression, or healthy ways that you cope with like the feeling of wanting to self-harm. Yeah.